Europe's migration dilemma, the deaths of people risking the dangerous channel crossing from France to the UK, puts more pressure on governments. Tough border controls are in place. So how now should countries tackle undocumented migration? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. The Channel has once again become the site of tragedy, with more people dying while trying to reach UK shores. The latest incident highlights an escalating migrant crisis that's posing a challenge to both French and British authorities. As the number of crossings surge, critics highlight the lack of cooperation between countries to address the issue. What will it take to manage the influx of undocumented migrants? Is targeting criminal gangs who organise the risky journeys effective enough, or are governments overlooking deeper systemic issues? We'll explore these questions and more with our panel of guests shortly, but first this report from Axel Zaimovic.
Yet another tragedy in the Channel. A dinghy carrying 59 people ran into trouble off the coast of France on Saturday night.
Le bilan est terrible.
The death toll is high. Unfortunately, 8 people died. The boat took to the sea from the area of Lasselec near the town of Birmingham. It quickly found itself in difficulty. The boat was clearly torn apart on the rocks.
The narrow stretch of water separating southern England and northern France has become a popular route for those hoping to make a life in Britain. This year alone, more than 21,000 people made the dangerous journey. Many believe the UK offers better chances for asylum seekers. The surge is putting pressure on both French and British authorities. But so far, the response has focused on dismantling the criminal gangs that organize these risky crossings. Human rights groups say safe, legal asylum routes are needed.
One of the key ones would be the UK has a border actually in France, and it should be allowing people to seek asylum at that border in France to allow them to safely travel to the UK. Secondly, it would look like expanding family reunification. Many of the individuals who are getting on these flimsy boats actually have family or ties in the UK. It can also look like work and study visas for people around the world.
The UK's approach has changed in recent months. The previous government had proposed a controversial plan to deport undocumented migrants and refugees to Rwanda. It was scrapped by the new administration led by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Downing Street has hinted another policy is under discussion, one that could mirror the approach taken by Italy. Following controversial deals with Tunisia and Libya, Italy has recorded a 62% drop in undocumented migrants this year. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has also signed a 5-year multi-million-dollar agreement with Albania to process up to 36,000 asylum seekers annually from countries Italy deems safe. The migration crisis isn't new. It dates back to 2015 when more than 1 million refugees and migrants entered Europe. It exposed deep divisions within the EU. Some countries welcomed asylum seekers, while others closed their borders and tested the bloc's solidarity. As winter approaches in the northern hemisphere and sea conditions worsen, concerns are growing that without significant policy changes, tragedies like this one will only become more frequent. Axel Zaimovic, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Well, now joining our discussion today on Inside Story, we have from Birmingham, Nando Sigona, a professor of international migration and forced displacement at the University of Birmingham. In London, Ravishaan Rahel Muthiah, the communications director at the charity Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants. And in Bristol, Yasha Maccanico, the co-president of Migreurop, a Europe-African network that focuses on the consequences of migration policies. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us today on Inside Story. Yet again, a tragic incident in that the world's busiest waterway that the UK calls the English Channel, the French call La Manche. It's at its shortest point, just 32 kilometres across. Ravishaan, the fact that now we've seen More people die, this time 8 die. Another incident just a couple of weeks ago, the worst this year, 12 died, 6 of them children and a pregnant woman. This is tragic that this keeps going on like this.
Yeah, it's a massive tragedy, and it's a stain on the reputation of the UK that this is allowed to happen. The previous government massively failed in looking after people who are trying to cross the channel, and this current government, again, with their policies of militarization, are going to make the same mistakes. We know that militarizing borders doesn't secure people, doesn't provide safety to people. It only makes their journeys harder. As you said, the Channel is one of the busiest crossing lanes in the world, and we're forcing people to cross that channel in small dinghies without providing them safe routes. It's a massive tragedy, but most importantly, it's an avoidable tragedy, and that the tragedy lies at the foot of the government and their policies, which fail to protect people who are seeking safety in our country.
Yasha, we'll get to the root causes of the problem and how we can solve them later in the programme. But do you think there's anything more that could be done just in terms of resources in the English Channel on both sides, trying to rescue these people and detect these people?
I don't think it's an issue of the amount of resources that are being invested. It's more an issue of what perspective the problem's being seen as. Because without an attempt to create some viable ways in which people can reach the UK, the boat crossings are going to continue. And that's the main issue, because trying to focus attention on the smuggling gangs takes away attention from the fact that the smuggling gangs only exist because of this prohibitionism in the migration policy field. And in particular, there was a proposal from a few weeks ago from the French government to have asylum adjudication in France, which the UK is currently refusing to contemplate. But the idea in general, as well as in the Channel, is a new look at the way in which migration is managed, the migration management blueprint that is being set up. So lots of money is being spent. Frontex is being involved, but it still continues to have the same kind of outlook, which is about strengthening the possibilities for states to kind of control migration.
Yeah, just to be clear to our viewers, Frontex is the EU's border control agency. If I can turn to you, Nando, before we expand it to the situation across Europe, just staying with the UK, in terms of these crossings, is the situation getting worse in terms of the numbers of people that are coming and taking this very treacherous journey across the Channel?
I think this year the figures tell us that we are on a similar trend than last year. 2 years ago, we had a peak with over 45,000 people crossing in 1 year alone, so in 2022. But that was a specific circumstance. Partly that was due with the arrival in mass of people from Albania. And already with the Rishi Sunak government, basically they start to develop a partnership with Albania that drastically reduced that specific migration flow. In terms of what has changed, though, in the last 4 years, since we start to see this phenomenon of irregular crossing in the Channel, is in a way the infrastructure of this crossing. Just to give you an example, in 2021 we had about 28,000 arrival. The people that were detected after having crossing into the UK, in about 1,030 boats. This means that each boat had about 25, 26 people. What we see now in the last couple of years is that each boat that arrives has on average about 50, 52 people. What this tells us is that we are going towards a more organized form of movement, where basically either the boats are bigger or more people are put on it. But basically also means that there is a much larger economy around it, because obviously each boat brings more money to those who are facilitating the crossing.
OK. Ravishaan, if I can come to you, these people are in France, which is a prosperous country. Why do they want to go to the UK rather than stay in France, number one? And what are the main countries where people are coming from in terms of those that are making this crossing?
Well, look, we found with our clients that, a lot of the people that come to this country, they come here because either they have a shared language, which is English, either they have family here and they want to reunite with them. And we know that, many people that come to this country have a history with the UK, whether that's because of the colonial ties of the empire or the language that was spread around the world. Also, we are an economy that should be able to take on these people. That's one thing we have to remember. So, when our clients come here, we have to be welcoming them. And we found many of our clients are coming from countries like Afghanistan. When we look at migrant crossings via the channel, we know that people from Afghanistan are overrepresented. But we
Ravishaan, are they the top one, Afghanistan, at the moment, from the figures you have?
Afghanistan are, but one thing that's really important that we should really talk about today is that there's only been, by the Home Office statistics, one Ukrainian national that has ever been detected crossing the channel since the war in Ukraine and Russia. So that's a really interesting stat, because what that shows is the Ukraine resettlement scheme, the Ukraine online visa scheme that the government set up was really successful in meaning that Ukrainians didn't have to cross the channel, didn't have to take treacherous routes. And Afghanistanis, Syrians, other nationals of countries across the world should be afforded that same right, that same humanitarian right that we gave to Ukrainians.
Okay,
So
Ravishaan, let me just stay with you on the Afghans. You say they're probably the number one. I mean, that is very interesting, isn't it, given the UK's involvement in Afghanistan for so many years, having its military there in Afghanistan, and the Taliban wouldn't have taken power again if the UK, along with other NATO countries, hadn't pulled out of Afghanistan. The UK has an involvement in the cause here, does it not?
Definitely. We have a massive involvement in the cause. We're complicit in the movement of these people, in the forced movement of these people. And we have a moral duty to these people and many people across the world to welcome them. And if we believe we are a leader of human rights and a leader in humanitarian causes, we should be starting by welcoming those people whose lives, frankly, we have torn apart by illegal invasions across the world. One of our clients who came from Afghanistan, he had to take a treacherous journey. He had to go through Iran, Turkey, Greece, and then via a small boat across the channel to arrive here. He was granted refugee status by the work of our legal team, so he's legitimately allowed to remain in this country because of the wars that we've created. And we need to really, instead of thinking about stopping the boats and stopping the gangs, we need to be thinking about how we fulfill our moral duty in the world.
OK, Nando, I'd like you to pick up on the Ukraine part of this that you heard Ravishaan mention there, because it seems that Ukrainians are being dealt with completely differently from every other country.
That's true, and this is actually a very important point for us to bear in mind. So the idea is that irregular crossing are only there because there are no alternative for some nationality. So just if we look at, for example, the country, we got Afghanistan, we got Vietnam, we got Iran, Syria, and then we got to the Horn of Africa, we got Sudan, Eritrea, among the biggest countries in the last few years. The point is, though, it's that what is interesting and is that you mentioned, for example, that France has recently, it was mentioned in the piece before, that France has recently offered the possibility for asylum assessment to be done in their territory for people then to travel to the UK, but there has been, the UK government is not happy with this proposal. Recently, the UK has liberalized access to visa for some countries, particularly in the south of Asia. With this liberalization also meant that, for example, we are seeing the number of Indian national or people from Sri Lanka and Bangladesh appearing in larger number, not huge number, but larger number than the past in the asylum statistics. The point is that these nationalities are not among those who you find on irregular crossing. So in many ways, these are people that have actually safe route to the UK, and then they can apply for asylum, presenting their case that has to be assessed. But what now the government is trying to do is actually to stop these flows. So rather than, while they're saying that they want to create safe and legal routes for people to claim asylum and then basically be recognized as a refugee if they can demonstrate it. What you're trying to do is actually to reimpose visa on those nationalities that they can travel and then apply for asylum, so that they penalize them.
Yasha, I think it's worth us briefly looking at what the UK government was doing until a few months ago, because Boris Johnson introduced a scheme in 2022 and it was taken up by Rishi Sunak when he became Prime Minister. And the plan, apparently, was to send plenty of these people to Rwanda, to effectively deport them to Rwanda. That scheme, as I understand it, cost $918.4 million. Just give us your assessment of the success of that project.
Yeah, I mean, it was an unmitigated disaster, and that could have been predicted from the start, because there were a series of legal requirements which were unlikely to be met. And in the end, the governments had to try to meet them by passing a law that, regardless of any considerations or what the situation was on the ground, Rwanda had to be considered safe by decree, which wasn't the case. But nonetheless, the Houses of Parliament approved that. So it was a problematic experiment from the point of view of costs. And the UK courts eventually kind of said that this was not a case of burden sharing, but of burden shifting from richer to less wealthy countries, and that on top of that, the legal requirements were not being met. So that was an unmitigated disaster, and it was predictable.
OK,
And
well, that plan was torn up by the new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, on day one. That was one of his day one announcements, that he was ending that policy. Ravishaan, let's look at what he's going to do instead. He said he's going to set up a new border security command, bringing in the border force officials, the police and the intelligence agencies. I mean, my question is, weren't those people already working close together? And is what you've got now, previously the slogan was stop the boats, now the slogan is smash the gangs. Is there any substance, or is it just a new slogan?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it looks like more political point scoring and more slogans. You know, we know what the real solution to this sort of a problem is. We've sort of touched on it already. It's providing safe routes through online visa schemes, like we did for the Ukrainians after the Russian invasion. We know that more militarization, more border security will only lead to more deaths in the channel. You know, the route that Keir Starmer is taking may be strong on the language. It may be a type of hard man politics that he wants to, show to some people in this country and prove that he's going to be tough on migration. But the fact is, it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to it's not going to ensure that people seeking safety are able to come to this country in a safe way. It's going to lead to more deaths. It's going to ensure that people continue to take treacherous journeys. We have to remember the deterrent policies, or so-called deterrence policies, of the last government, which was the Rwanda scheme, Bibi Stockholm, putting people on a barge and so on, were seen to fail. They are massive failures. And it looks like Keir Starmer is continuing on that route of failure. And the real human cost won't be felt by Starmer or his allies. It will be felt by those people that are taking these treacherous routes. So we have to have some common sense in this politics and put humanity at the center. And that humanity needs to mean that we offer people safe routes immediately.
OK. Nando, if I can ask you about the political context of this, you might think that Keir Starmer can do what he wants. He had a landslide win on July the 4th, but also in August we had riots that shocked the UK. Can he politically, you think, just do what is the best policy here, or is he got to take account of public opinion? And this is a very emotive issue.
It's a very emotive issue, especially because it has been very much pushed, especially before the election, by specific sort of political entrepreneur or far-right forces that they really wanted to gain electoral gain out of it. We've seen it in the past already with the Brexit referendum, how much the migration issues can be politicized for other purposes. The Rwanda plan was never meant to work. This is actually why just a month before the election, even the Prime Minister said, well, if I win again, then we open up that dossier, otherwise it doesn't matter. So in many ways, it was clear that it was not something that was meant to work, but it was something that was there also to signal something else, which was the repositioning of Britain in the world, the relationship with the former colonies, with the Commonwealth, etc. In reality, the only success success in inverted commas, but in terms of reducing irregular crossing that Sunak had, one was obviously through the introduction of schemes like the one for Hong Kongers or the one for Ukrainians, because there was no need for them to cross in the sea. And the other was for having strong relationship with France, or try to rebuild the relationship with France, which had been completely politicized by the previous government or Boris Johnson, for example. So what Starmer is doing is trying to reconnect with Europe and using the migration issues as a tool for reconnecting. So exactly the opposite that Brexiteers have done in the last few years. The point is that in all this game playing, those who suffer are actually those who need protection, the weakest and the poorest, and the one that cross and risk their life.
Yasha, we heard there, he's planning to reconnect with Europe on this issue, even if there's no way, he says, that the UK will rejoin the European Union. And part of that is Starmer going on a trip to Italy. His Italian counterpart, Giorgia Meloni, perhaps politically very, very different from him. Her party has roots in neo-fascism, yet she, according to the EU, has the solution to the problem, a 64% drop in those making crossings from North Africa to Italy so far this year. Do you think the Italian solution is the way forward?
No, the Italian solution is not the way out of the problem. And this was shown particularly this weekend when former Interior Minister Salvini was the prosecuting magistrate asked for 6.5 years imprisonment for the minister because of some dissuasive tactics which were employed in 2019. Now, the whole deterrence and externalization of migration policy efforts to North Africa, in particular, has empowered the Libyan Coast Guard to take over, in fact, search and rescue duties from European naval assets. And that has been tragic, both from the point of view of deaths at sea, but also from the point of view of EU and EU member states kind of violating the rule of law and in the framework of international law in quite a massive way, because Libya has been assigned a SAR zone, which is a search and rescue zone, under the United Nations International Maritime Organization system for safety of life at sea. And basically, it's absurd because search and rescue areas presume that there is a safe port in which people can be disembarked after rescues. And in Libya, due to the conditions in detention centers, that doesn't exist. At the same time, in Libya, there is not one government which is in control of the whole country, so they don't even have a maritime rescue coordination center.
Okay.
More recently,
Ravishaan, if I could bring it to you, Libya, but also Tunisia. The EU has paid a lot of money to Tunisia recently to boost its security. Italy has also done the same. And yet Tunisia is a country where the president is accused of authoritarian behaviour and human rights abuses.
Yeah, I think, we need to really be careful, especially from a UK perspective. We need to be careful with how close Keir Starmer wants to follow in Meloni's path. Offshoring our human rights responsibilities and our moral responsibilities, our international responsibilities to provide sanctuary to people who are moving or who are forced to leave their homes. Offshoring that responsibility puts you in grave danger, because who are you offshoring that responsibility to? We've already been down that road with the Rwanda scheme. We've already seen how dangerous that can be to be sending, or to be supposedly sending people. Many of our clients, again, bring it back to the humans in this story, many of our clients were horrified by the thought of going to Rwanda, a country they had no knowledge of, a country they had never intended of going to. They were terrified. They didn't know what they were going to find when they got to Rwanda. And we have a responsibility. Keir Starmer, as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, has a responsibility. Shirking that responsibility, like Meloni has done by shirking it to Tunisia and Libya, us doing the same with the proposed deal with Albania would be a massive mistake, and we have to avoid that at all costs.
And Nando, I mean, we have people, many of these people, who are fleeing appalling things in their own countries, and the situation, one thinks, is only going to get worse. And I'm thinking particularly about the war in Sudan.
The war in Sudan, we got tension rising between Eritrea and Sudan and in the region. So if you look at the countries where people are coming from, are very much from areas which are stable and at risk of conflict, or where there are significant human rights violations. How people travel, how people flee, depends on what opportunities are available for them. Obviously, they will go for the safest route available, for the one they can afford. But there are some nationalities in the world for which there are no way or no safe way to find the protection in this country. I think this infatuation of Starmer for Meloni is also a part of the political risk. Is almost paradoxical. I mean, all the plan that Italy has put in place, the relationship with the countries in North Africa, have been challenged in court in Italy, and there have been serious accusation of human rights violation. And I see almost paradoxical that someone who come from a background as a human rights lawyer basically end up building a close relationship with a government like the Italian one. And the other thing I found also worrying is that while the Liberal government has dropped the Rwanda plan, recently we heard that the German the government is considering hiring the Rwanda facilities from the UK for actually doing offshoring of their asylum seekers there. That's also extremely worrying.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all three of our guests today, Nando, Sigona, Ravishaan, Rahel, Muthiah and Yasha, Maccanico. If you missed any part of our programme, you can always go back and watch it again anytime if you want at aljazeera.com. If you have comments, contributions, even complaints, post them on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Alternatively, you can find us on X, where we're at AJ Inside Story. From me, James Bays, and the production team here, please stay safe. Bye-bye for now.